What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another collection update for you, and we are finally going to get into all the stuff that I bought in Florida, or at least, well, like, part of it, because I bought a lot of shit, and that's really no surprise to anyone that watched this channel. So yeah, we have pretty much the start of a long run of stuff that I just got there, and well, we'll have a nice long section of stuff that I got in Denver as well, so get ready for that. So generally when I go shopping down there, I'm looking for stuff to patch up holes in the collection. Like, I'm not necessarily going after new releases, I'm just going after stuff that would be new to me and stuff that I've been meaning to get for a while, and needless to say, I found a bunch. So this will be a really fun mixed bag as we go through this, but yeah, let's just get this one started because we have a lot of stuff to cover. Except Metal Heart. This is the 6th album from these German heavy metal legends. I've been meaning to actually get into this band more, at least checking out some of their older stuff. The only thing I have outside of this now is their most recent album, and I thought it was pretty decent. It's just old school, rowdy, heavy metal, and I keep hearing their classic era is really good, and well, this was kind of the only thing I could find in their classic era as I was shopping around the stores. And honestly, I might have jumped off on the wrong spot in terms of their classic era. This album is definitely a mixed bag. Like, you have some really good songs in here that are just, you know, cool echoes of bands like Scorpions and Judas Priest. Like Midnight Mover, I absolutely love that song. It's great, hooky, got some powerful riffs behind it. The Middle Eastern flair of the title track is really interesting, and how they squeeze in like classical pieces, like there's Tchaikovsky and Beethoven sort of worked into the harmonies and leads on here, which I know that's like kind of a big thing with this band. But mostly what I'm looking for is like good classic heavy metal riffs, and definitely find that on songs like Wrong is Right and Teach Us to Survive. But I definitely still have issues with this album, and I guess like the band to a degree, just in terms of I have never been a fan of Udo's vocals. Never thought he was like that great of a vocalist. Like, he's got a really unique voice, like he's easy to pick out. Balls to the Wall was a huge hit for him. I honestly thought it was an AC/DC song for like the longest time when I was younger, and then I found out that it's like, oh no, it's by this band, Except. And then I saw the album cover and I was like, man, that is very homoerotic. Like, sure, you definitely want to have a theme that matches the album title, but leather shorts? It's barely leather shorts, it's almost like leather underwear. But honestly, the biggest issue I have with this, because occasionally Udo does sound fine on here, is the fact that this definitely is taking a huge grab at more of a commercialized sound. And that kind of makes sense in terms of their timeline, because this is the album that followed Balls to the Wall, which is still their highest selling and most recognized album to date. And well, I mean, honestly, when you make a big splash like that, you kind of want to try to follow it up with something that is a little bit similar and, you know, is going to win you more fans. These guys almost kind of mirror what Judas Priest did after British Steel came out. Like, you had Breaking the Law, Living After Midnight, they were big fucking hits. They won to match that success, and then they have Point of Entry, which is definitely more accessible, but definitely uneven. Songs like Screaming for a Love Bite, which, man, that chorus is obnoxious and repetitive, and honestly makes up most of the song. It's just way too poppy and like closer to like, you know, bands like Def Leppard at the time, like just trying to write big singles and shit. And honestly, one of the main issues here is definitely Udo's vocals, because they're not accessible enough to really kind of push them to that next level. Like, Rob Halford had that register. He could sing fucking anything. Udo was definitely more limited in his range. And Too High to Get It Right kind of suffers from the same thing. I mean, the chorus isn't as repetitive, but it's definitely bad. Like, it's not an earworm I would want to get stuck in my head. Honestly, I mean, I still want to check out the earlier stuff, like, you know, closer to like the first album, and kind of move on from there. But this is, I don't know, just really uneven. Like, there's songs I really like on here. Mostly Midnight Mover, and I think Teach Us to Survive is really nice too. But a lot of this is just kind of grasping at commercial success. And honestly, I don't think their grip on those straws was that tight. And honestly, I don't think it was really them. Like, you know, they're meant to be a kind of a rowdy, heavy metal act that just writes good fucking riffs and, you know, just metal anthems. This just doesn't feel like them. But again, I know people really like this one. It's just kind of a divisive album in the discography. I'd say check it out. Again, Midnight Mover I think is a fantastic song, and there's other songs in there that are good, but it's just a little bit uneven for me. But either way, I just say check it out and find out if you like it for yourself. Alchemist Organism. This is the 4th album from this Australian progressive death metal. God, like, it's really kind of hard to describe. Like, progressive death metal really isn't exactly what they are because there's a lot more going on in here, but I think that'll just have to do at the moment. This band has one of the most unique sounds in progressive death metal I've heard. There's tons of different elements coming in. There's like psychedelic stuff in here. There's didgeridoos like right out of the gate, which, I mean, hey, they're Australian, I guess they get a pass in that, and they incorporate it really well as like really cool synths and like tribal elements. And the tribal elements are specifically Aboriginal, which I think is really cool, but it's their songwriting. Their songwriting is really dynamic, really interesting. Like the riff work is very unique. There's elements of, I would say, like post-metal or post-hardcore or post-punk kind of woven in here. There's a lot of stuff on here that made me think, you know what, I'm pretty sure Gojira listened to this band. And honestly, I think this band listened to Killing Joke too, especially in the vocal delivery. Like the guy has this particular vocal delivery he uses a lot on here where it kind of sounds like, you know, Jazz Coleman's more gruff vocals. But the whole vibe of this, I don't know, it kind of matches up with Australia in general. Like it's kind of a desert sort of vibe. Like it's lots of open areas in terms of the songs. Really cool builds. The Evolution trilogy on here is absolutely amazing. And I love how each song goes into the next and each movement is vastly different. Like you have more subdued ones that are like big, like almost kind of post-metal buildups. And then you get into like much more heavy and intense stuff later. And again, the psychedelic elements that kind of come in, I think add a really cool wrinkle, especially on the instrumental Eclectic and the last track, Escape from the Black Hole. There's a lot of like cool trippy synths and guitar lines that are kind of like looped. There's like delays on them. And I don't know, they just kind of incorporate all this really well. And this gets flat out ferociously heavy too, but I think a lot of it is about just the big dynamic sweeps, the weird atmosphere. It is kind of a unique prog album. And I would even just say like a unique prog metal band. I own Austral Alien and Tripsis, and I think they're both fantastic albums, but so far out of all of them, I think this is probably my favorite so far. This just has some absolutely wild writing, and I love the pace of it. I feel like there's like a cool story that kind of flows along with this. This is an absolutely fantastic listen. I strongly recommend this for fans of, God, man, it's really hard to say. Like, I guess Gojira and Killing Joke, just because I brought them up, but man, it is really kind of hard to like really single this band out in terms of like bands that sound like them because they really do have a unique sound. I just urge you to check it out. Like, Alchemist in general is just an awesome band. Unfortunately, they broke up some time ago, but just go out there, check out their shit. It's absolutely amazing. And I would strongly recommend this one if you can find it, because I think this is, again, the best one I've heard so far, but I haven't heard the earlier albums, and I imagine they're probably good too. But yeah, either way, check this out. Absolutely awesome album. Alkaloid, the Malkuth Grimoire. This is the debut album from this German progressive death metal, I guess you can almost call it a supergroup, even though I can't think of offhand all the members that are in here in terms of their names, but I know this features current and ex-members of bands like Obscura, Dark Fortress, Eternity's End, and Aborted, and actually a lot of other bands. In fact, Hans Grossman is in here, so that should cover like fucking 15 bands right there. Anyway, this is absolutely amazing progressive death metal. I own their second album, Liquid Anatomy, and so far that is it from these guys. But this is just impressive songwriting. It is technical, but still melodic and engaging. And oh my God, these guys know how to make songs each have their own individual identity while pulling from like some very obvious influences on here. On the more prog side, they definitely pull a lot from classic bands like Rush, Yes. I would even say like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. There's really cool synth buildups, really awesome clean vocals pairing off with harsher vocals, and just straight up like prog metal writing, like really interesting guitar lines and synths and layering and just crazy off-time rhythms, but all done with like a amazing sense of melody. And on the other side, they know how to make this shit absolutely brutal too. you know, good swells of like build-ups that are like, again, more clean, more proggy into just giant, chuggy death metal riffs. The song Cthulhu on here is straight up morbid angel worship, and they do it so damn well. The riffs are sludgy, they're darker, they're more sinister. You have songs that are a little bit more blasty and more energetic, like from a Hadron Machinist and Alter Magnitudes. Alter Magnitudes has a lot of melodic death metal nods and the very frantic but very catchy riffing on it. And I like the fact that this is, you know, technical as hell, but songwriting comes first and dynamics come first. And they save that for really cool moments like the 4-part epic Dyson Sphere, which is an absolute killer journey of a song. The first part of Dyson Sphere, Mining the Ore Cloud, actually has this really cool bouncy sort of groove to it. It's kind of playful, but as the song goes on, it shifts around in like more sinister territory. In fact, the 4th part, Soul Omega, I feel like there's like a little bit of a tribute to Black Sabbath's Electric Funeral on there. Like the riff is very, very similar. And I don't know, I kind of feel like it might be like a little obvious tribute because Cthulhu feels like a fucking Morbid Angel song. And that's something that happens on the second album as well. There's a track on there that just sounds flat out like Morbid Angel. Even Obscura does that every now and then, where they just have a song that sounds like a Morbid Angel worship song. Can't blame them. I fucking worship that band too. The song C Value Enigma is kind of a weird one on here. It is either a guitar solo, but it's like a 7 or 8 string guitar, or it's a bass solo. It's almost all like tapping. It is absolutely insane sounding. Like that's some of the most intricate playing I think I've heard on either guitar or bass in terms of like prog metal. It's just really wild. It does feel like probably the most flashy track. Like you could say like maybe it's the filler one where they're just showing off, but it's really well done. I pretty much love everything on this. I loved Liquid Anatomy too. I thought that was an absolutely fantastic album. If you were a giant fan of, probably I would say Obscura, like in terms of all the bands that these guys are from, Obscura is probably the one they sound the most like, except way more proggy, way more clean vocals, way more vocal dynamics overall, because there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's throat singing, there's whispers, there's cleans, there's growls, you know, screams. They're doing a lot of shit to match with how wild the music is. But check this out. This is an absolutely incredible album. Check out Liquid Anatomy too. Both of them are absolutely killer. This is just amazing from start to finish. And yeah, check it out. It's awesome. Anal Blast, Battered, Bleeding Bitch. This is the second album from this Minnesota death grind act. Came out in 2004, and I probably should not say any of these song titles on here if I want this video to not get flagged, because this is pretty much flat out AC worship, and I'm not talking about air conditioning. It's that AC that I'm just not going to say because I've been flagged here recently for saying at least that second word a lot. Anyway, this is flat out vulgar, disgusting death grind, short, gnarly songs about a myriad of things that I cannot say. I don't know, I gotta say at least a couple of these. Menstrual munchies / eating tampons, that's fine. Fecal mud pack. I don't think you can call it mud at that point, you just call it fecal pack. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop there. Musically, this is, again, short, violent, very roughly recorded. The vocals range from, well, I mean, just pig snorts. I don't even think they're saying words to, you know, parts where they're saying words and just screaming their guts out. I like death grind overall. You know, most people know that, but when it comes down to like the more brutal side of it, like, you know, just the all pig vocals thing kind of annoys me, especially when I think this is almost sort of a parody too, so they're just making pig noises and not saying a damn thing. Admittedly though, it is kind of hilarious, and also they do occasionally have some solid riffs on here. Like the song, track 6, yeah, that song actually has some more technical riffs, a little bit closer to like Dying Fetus overall, like there's some good groovy sections to it. The songs, nope, not gonna say that one either. Track 4 and yeah, we'll just say track 7. Both have a little bit more punky flair to them, like the vocals change up. It's a little bit more like D-beat and kind of crusty sounding. I will pretty much go on record and say that none of the lyrical content on here should be taken seriously under any circumstances, because it's all just intended to offend. That is pretty obvious. I mean, just by the album title, by the band title. Honestly, the thing that they might be the most well known for in terms of history was at one point they featured Paul Gray, Joey Jordison and Jim Root from Slipknot. They were in this band in the 90s at various points in their career before leaving and then forming Slipknot. Outside of that, they're pretty much kind of known as like an AC sort of worship band. And, you know, honestly, some of that stuff works live just in terms of the hilarity, because there are 3 live tracks on here and they are pretty hilarious. The frontman's banter is quite entertaining. I want to say there was a song he introduced, like the song was inspired by me masturbating to soap operas as a child, or something to that effect. I can't exactly remember everything he said because I was laughing out loud when I heard it. But yeah, in terms of like music, it's okay. Like, it's not like the best death grind out there. I hear their first album's a lot better, but this is the one I picked up just because I wanted to hear it. I heard about this band. I'm not the biggest AC fan, so yeah, it's okay. Like, it's more of a novelty more than anything else, but check it out. Form your own opinions. You might really dig it. If you're a big AC fan, you'll probably dig this, honestly. Like, it's very close to AC in a lot of ways, and one of those ways is definitely lyrical. I think the only difference is they didn't call Chris Barnes a pussy. That's about it. But yeah, check it out. It's interesting, at least. Ancient Necropsy, self-titled. This is the debut album from this one-man Colombian brutal death metal act. Ivan Jaramillo, I think that's how you say his name. I'm probably fucking it up. Anyway, he is an ex-member of Separation, and this is his one-man brutal death metal act. I mean, it's very much in the vein of like Mortician and Putrid Pile. Maybe not as good. I mean, obvious drum machine, thick chunky guitars. Vocals, I mean, they're good, like, deep vocals, but they are almost entirely the same on every track, even down to the cadences. They kind of get a little dull, but it's that same dull roar that really doesn't have, like, any, like, big pitch changes at all. It's kind of by the numbers brutal death metal. There are some really cool tracks in here. I do like Abducted by a Killer Martian. Yeah, some of these song titles are really wild. Australopithecus Corpse. I do like the riffs on Brutal Grindcore. There is a hyphen between grind and core, which I think is just kind of odd. But there's some cool slam riffs on that one, and some cool tempo changes and like dynamics on Fucking with an Unholy Witch from Hell. Again, some really interesting song titles. Maybe they were in Spanish initially and they sounded a lot cooler, and then they translated and like, well, keep it. There's really not a lot to say about this one, unfortunately. Like, a lot of the songs are very similar. Like, you occasionally have a groovy breakdown. The blast beats are very static, again, because, you know, programmed drums, and this came out in 2003, so there isn't a lot of stuff they're really able to do with the programmed drums. Like, you know, this definitely sounds like a passion project. Now, I hear the later albums by this band are actually a lot better, like, you know, improved in terms of the songwriting and made it a little bit more interesting, but this one is, okay. It's another one where I'd say it's kind of a novelty. Like, it's, you know, fun for what it is. You know, it's brutal. It's definitely silly. The song titles, again, are great. Track 3, Mutilated by an Innocent Child. I don't think that kid's innocent at that point. I think he's a little fucking monster, honestly. I mean, I'm sure he's just misunderstood, but if I could actually make out what he was saying, maybe there's a whole explanation as to why he's innocent still. Yeah, production's rough. There's some dead air in between tracks that I think could have been chopped out, but again, this is a one-man project. It was more than likely produced by this one gentleman. I mean, again, it was his first shot at it, so I guess I'll give him a pass, but I would check out some later stuff by this because I was still pretty entertained by it. But yeah, if you like just flat out brutal death metal and drum machines, and you're a big fan of like Putrid Pile and, you know, Mortician, and you want something kind of in that vein, but again, albeit not as good, definitely check this out. It's yeah, pretty decent. I'm, you know, again, willing to check out some of the later stuff, but yeah, for this, it's all right. But yeah, still check it out. Behemoth Thelema.6. This is the 5th album from Polish blackened death metal legends Behemoth. Been around for fucking forever. This is one of the few that I was missing, and honestly, this is kind of close to my favorite era of Behemoth. I like the more death metal side of them. I still like what they're doing now and their earlier stuff. There's some pretty solid, you know, old school black metal in it, but this period and pretty much onward, like all the way through, I would say, Evangelion or Evangelion or however you say that. I've heard it say both ways. That's like really my favorite era. I got into them on Demigod, so I got into them when they were a little bit more brutal, and that's kind of what I gravitate towards. And this is definitely that. This is blast beats, violent syncopated riffs. It's heavier than hell. Like, this is where it's kind of still close to like bands like Decapitated and Vader as well. But there's also still some black metal that's still there, kind of more as atmosphere. And the atmosphere in here is a little bit more on the industrial side, so it kind of has like that sort of like interesting dark edge to the samples. Like, there's a lot of just, you know, creepy atmosphere peppered in. There's a lot of stuff in here that I feel is kind of similar to Nile too, especially Natural Born Philosopher. I absolutely love that song. But Christians to the Lions, I mean, that's, I guess, kind of the hit on here, is honestly still one of my favorite songs. I've only had it on compilations before, but now I have it on the entire album, and again, this entire album is pretty fucking awesome. I like the more groovy setup on The Universe, Illuminations, Say Hello to My Demons. That's kind of goofy. That song builds up really well. Like, you know, a lot of stuff after this kind of went more for the blast beat side, like just kind of going for it, and I totally get it. They're really good at that. In fact, the drum work in here is absolutely fucking crushing. But I like hearing some different elements. Like the song 23, The Youth Manifesto, actually has an almost Pantera-like breakdown, like kind of like I'm Broken a little bit, albeit, you know, a little bit more brutal. And this is the edition with the 4 bonus tracks, so I have their killer cover of Sarcophago's Sathanas, and the really interesting cover of Hello Space Boy, originally done by David Bowie, which they definitely make it their own. That doesn't sound a thing like David Bowie anymore, but it does sound pretty awesome. Yeah, this is a solid album, but I knew it would be. I've listened to it before in terms of like streaming. It's just I needed to own it finally. Now I got it, and yeah, in terms of like early Behemoth, I think I only have maybe 1 or 2 more left. Like, I still need to own a copy of Grom, but outside of that, I think I have most of it. But yeah, this is a fucking killer album. Again, more of their death metal side, and admittedly that is kind of my favorite side, even though I still like what they do now. You know, the last album was better than the one before it, and, you know, The Satanist I still think is, you know, quite a fucking album by them. But the death metal stuff, I fucking absolutely love. So yeah, if you love, again, like Vader, Decapitated, Nile, shit like that, like this is definitely more along the lines of what is on this album. So yeah, check it out. It's nasty. Billy Bio, Leaders and Liars. This is the debut album from Billy Graziati of Biohazard. And, you know, Biohazard's been a super important band in terms of my, like, love of hardcore early on. And somehow this one kind of flew under the radar for me last year, and I wanted to check it out, so picked it up. And, well, it's kind of just okay. Immediately I had high hopes for this because Billy Graziati has like a killer voice. He writes killer fucking riffs. You know, Urban Discipline, State of the World Address, still like 2 of my favorite albums by Biohazard. And this definitely still has a lot of that. Like, you have big hardcore grooves and like faster punky tracks. There's still a lot of solid riffing on here. You know, it definitely has that sound, but I feel like it's kind of missing the energy, and one of the big issues with it are the vocals. Generally, I don't have any complaints about Billy's vocals when he's growling. Like, in fact, I think he's got a cool, unique, hardcore growl. It stands out. I could pretty much pick him out in terms of like guest spots anywhere. But the clean singing on here is really flat. This especially hurts it when it tries to get more anthemic, because they like to layer the vocals, a lot of vocal harmonies, and they're all kind of flat. And it wouldn't be much of a problem if it didn't happen so often on here. Like, that is kind of one of the main things that happens, is these big anthemic, kind of clean choruses that just don't work. When this is more aggressive, honestly, it's pretty decent, unless you get one of those choruses. You know, on the more like metallic hardcore side, like there's some really good stuff in here, but a lot of this is sort of hampered by, again, like the more punk side and trying to be maybe too catchy instead of being just more raw and in your face. I'm kind of let down by this, but I do take some solace in the fact that Biohazard is reuniting for the Milwaukee Metal Fest, so maybe that'll stoke some creative fires. There's a lot of cool metallic hardcore coming out right now, and maybe they'll kind of, you know, jump on that train and kind of put out something badass again. But yeah, this one, man, I really wanted to like it, but it really wasn't my thing. But again, as always, I urge you to check it out for yourself. Who knows, you might really dig this. For me, I just wanted something a little bit more abrasive that really kind of reminded me more of Biohazard and while this is, you know, kind of its own thing, it's just kind of uneven. But yeah, check it out, form your own opinions. Who knows, you might really dig it. Alright, I have a split here between Black September and Ravenlord. And admittedly, I bought this because I thought this was the Black September out of Chicago. Really awesome, like underrated black and death metal act. I don't think they're around anymore. But this Black September is actually a one-man Dutch black metal act, and then the other one is a two-man Polish black metal act. And, well, this is a pretty interesting split. Both of them vastly underground. The Black September side is probably my favorite side of the bunch. It's a little bit more put together musically. The drums are probably a drum machine, I would guess. Like, they're a little too exact, and the sound of them, it just sounds like a drum machine. But it's more just straightforward, kind of raw but melodic black metal. The production on it is really uneven, and that is because it's pulled from like different eras. Or like some of it is demo stuff, some of it is remastered, and what you get is songs that sound like different bands but fronted by the same guy. There's some decent songs on that side. I like the song At War. It's pretty nice. The song Cobra is definitely some more like Marduk worship. Like, it's very fast and aggressive. The song Lord's Beauty is an interesting one. It kind of goes more D-beat crust punk with like a little bit of a blackened feel to it. And I think the song Evil is a death cover. It might be like Evil Dead. It was kind of hard to tell. Like, again, the production's very, you know, grainy and raw, but it definitely has a more death metal feel, so it might actually be a death cover. Like, it said it was a death cover on archives, but the archives have been wrong about shit before. But honestly, this side, it wasn't too bad. But when I got down to Ravenlord, or Ravenlord Darkstorm, at least they were that from 2000 to 2001 in terms of any information I could find in this band, it's pretty bad. It's more ambient, depressive black metal. I know both members do synths. One does guitars and vocals, and the other one does drums and vocals, and drums are barely on this side. It's more synth and ambient stuff, and honestly the synths sound like, I don't know, you just fired up a Super Nintendo game and it's a really gothic, creepy one. It's super lo-fi. The vocals range from, you know, gothic muttering to agonized screams that sound like they did the entire vocal takes while the dude was walking on Legos. Like, I mean, I suppose it's pretty good for what they were going for, but it's, again, so lo-fi, the production's so bad, it's really kind of unlistenable. And the songs are just kind of dull. Like, honestly, the sound effects and samples and all the atmosphere is more interesting than any of the music they actually put together on here. There's a lot of time spent building up these tracks, and the payoff is very, very minimal. I honestly did not like any of the tracks on Ravenlord's side. It was pretty rough. They even peppered in a live track in there, which sounded like it was recorded on a tape deck, and yeah, it's a little bit punkier. Like, there's actually some drums there, but it's still not very good, honestly. Like, it was so bad to the point I thought this was like kind of a parody of black metal. Like, someone just did this as a troll to sort of like make fun of all the tropes of like depressive black metal or something. And, you know, that's just me. Like, this could be a super serious project and I could just be shitting on them a little bit here. But I'm not gonna say I liked it because I didn't. The Black September side is probably the only side I would recommend on here. Again, this is a super underground release. Again, the Black September side isn't too bad. It's just, you know, the uneven production can kind of hamper some of the songs a little bit. But, I mean, overall, their side was pretty decent. Ravenlord, skip it. Just don't even, just pretend it doesn't exist, because honestly, there's just nothing to it. That's just me, though. You might really dig it. Either way, check it out. Form your own opinions. Who knows, this might be your favorite thing. I say that a lot, and, you know, it could be, but I got a hunch it won't be. But yeah, check it out regardless. Bludgeon, A Crimson Epoch. This is a compilation of pretty much everything that this Delaware / Pennsylvania Black and Death Metal act ever released. and that consisted of 2 demos. Their first demo, Maniac None with a Bat, great title, that came out in 1997, and Abandon All Hope, which came out in 2001, which was the same year that this band broke up. They did change their name twice, once to Megaton, once to Face the Pain. Both of those kind of sound a little bit more hardcore. I don't know if they like try to change their style in there, but this was a pretty decent black and death metal. More of a blend, honestly. Like, you have good death metal moments, you have more like black metal coldness in here. The vocals are definitely more along the lines of death metal, but the first demo, especially Maniac None with a Bat, is the one I prefer because it's got a lot of solid riffs on it. When it comes down to death metal, I think they take more from like melodic death metal, because there's a lot of like stuff that kind of sounds very like, you know, similar to Hypocrisy or In Flames in their earlier years, and maybe like, you know, Dissection, albeit with like kind of a more raw sound overall. There's some solid standout tracks in here. I really like the more trad metal riffs that pop up on Drawn and Quartered, and Cleansed in Fire actually has a really surprising Death Doom breakdown on it. Overall, it does sound like a demo. It's more raw sounding. The vocals are very dry. There's not a lot of effects on them at all, like not even like a little bit of reverb. It's just dry, raw vocals. Again, more death metal roars than blackened screams, but you do have like a good flip-flop between the two. And the guitar work is honestly pretty solid on here. A lot of it kind of reminds me of like, you know, Nunslaughter, except without like the punky edge to it. Now the other demo, which I might have these flipped, the Abandon All Hope demo might be the better of the two between the two, even though I love Maniac None with a Bat. But the other demo that represents the back half of this is way more raw. In fact, it sounds like, you know, it was recorded on a tape deck in a garage, and the songs are essentially the same. Actually, all of them appear on the second demo, so again, I might have got these flipped, but they're shortened, they're less dynamic, and at least with the second demo, I guess, it's a little bit more professionally done. You know, the songs have a little bit of room to breathe, the elements are separated a little bit more, but style-wise, I think this is pretty solid. Now this does have a remix of the opening track, Smother Your Children. Honestly, it sounds just like a slightly cleaner version of the second demo's version, but honestly, like, again, in terms of like the music itself, I think it's pretty well written. It's just the only thing we have are the demos, and they are a little bit rough, but I mean, they were recorded like fucking, you know, over 20 years ago. But again, musically, I like this. This is pretty solid, you know, black and death metal, more melody than I was expecting, and some solid riff work all over the place. Not a bad find. I kind of just picked this one up on a whim. I looked it up and saw it was black and death metal, and I saw it was from Delaware, and I don't have much from Delaware in terms of like states of metal stuff, so I figured this might be something, you know, interesting to go over. I already have tons from Pennsylvania, so yeah, I'm going to count this one for Delaware. I would say, again, if you like stuff like Hypocrisy, like kind of when they got more into the, you know, more mellow death sound, or again, like Nunslaughter, albeit, you know, longer songs, or again, like early In Flames, and also some dissection there in terms of the more black moments. Definitely check this out. This was pretty decent. Botch, an anthology of dead ends. This is the second and final EP from this Tacoma hardcore act, pretty much one of the most influential acts in terms of, you know, that more spazzy breed of metalcore, often called mathcore, like, you know, very similar to Norma Jean, Dillinger Escape Plan, that sort of thing. I'm a big fan of We Are the Romans and America Nervosa. Like, they're absolutely awesome albums, and I saw this one, I had to pick it up. I didn't know this was the last one they released before they broke up, but hey, they reunited last year, and there was a new song, so hopefully there's new material coming out. Now, I didn't notice this when I bought it, but when I was loading up the tracks, I noticed that all of the tracks are misspelled names of countries. Like the opening track is Spain, then Japan. All of the N's and all of these countries have been replaced with M's, and it's kind of silly but kind of interesting. But musically, this is very similar to We Are the Romans. It's, you know, spazzy but groovy, lots of cool breakdowns, weird atonal crawling guitars, amazing bass work, drums are fucking frantic as hell. But I feel like this one is like a little bit more restrained and definitely a bit more experimental. Now, of course, you get a lot of the weird spazzy transitions and kind of like almost like acid jazz hardcore that they're known for, especially on tracks like Japan and Vietnam, which that's just fucking silly, but that's hilarious. But there's some vastly different stuff on here, namely the song Afghanistan. It's more of a post-metal track. And honestly, you know, listening to this and knowing full well their bassist is the bassist for Russian Circles, it kind of sounds more like Russian Circles, albeit with vocals, clean vocals. And honestly, Botch is not known for clean vocals. This was kind of, you know, an isolated incident of that, at least as far as I know. Like, I mean, you might have had like some spoken word stuff or like, you know, less growly vocals in the past, but really not clean singing, and it's really good. There's really cool vocal harmonies on it. It's a steady sort of post-metal build. It's way more subdued, way more melodic, way more atmospheric, and honestly, it might be my favorite track on here. And Afghanistan, that is really difficult to say because I want to say the country itself, is a really cool build into the last track, Nicaragua. It kind of takes this kind of noisy sort of like post-metal build, the drums get more intense, and Nicaragua is like predominantly just sort of a noisy, chaotic track with an absolutely soul-crushing breakdown in it. I've been a fan of this band for years, and I have not really seen the EPs around. Like, again, this came out in 2001 on Hydra Head, which, I mean, a big Hydra Head fan. Like, that label spawned so many killer bands. But I've been revisiting this band a lot here lately, and hearing how much they have influenced, you know, metalcore, hardcore, and I guess like mathcore or whatever the hell you want to call it. There's a lot of worship and tribute bands still out there, still doing, you know, what Botch has been doing for years, or at least for a number of years before breaking up, and sounds like they're going to be doing again. But yeah, this is a fantastic EP, kind of interesting swan song, and I really like the fact that it was very telling of at least one member's stuff that he was going to be doing later on. If you're a longtime Botch fan, I imagine you probably know about this and you probably own it, but if you've never got into Botch before, this might be maybe an easier one to get into. It is maybe a little bit less chaotic than their two full lengths, but it's still pretty fucking wild sounding, and yeah, it's just spazzy, awesome hardcore slash metalcore, and few bands have done it as well. So yeah, definitely check this out. Absolutely awesome. Cemetery Urn, self-titled. This is the third album from this Australian death metal act. Features current and former members of bands like Eschaton and Abominator. Weird, I think I actually picked up Cemetery Urn last year when I was down in Florida, and I think it was their album Barbaric Retribution. I mean, it should be, that's the only other one I own. And clearly I liked it, otherwise I probably wouldn't have bought this, but then again, I do buy shit at random. But I do know that I had that album at least, and I did like it, and this is just some flat-out ugly, very Morbid Angel incantation style death metal. It's murky, lots of dark, deep tremolos, roared vocals, tons of blast beats. In fact, I would say this is kind of like Christian doing a Morbid Angel album where it is predominantly blast beats. Like, there's some really solid grooves on here, and like some stuff that is slightly more death doom, but a lot of this is very high energy, very blasty, but very evil and sinister, you know, mixed in with the brutality. Like, it doesn't sound just brutal as hell, like where it's just relentless chugging. There's a lot of cool, like, dark sounding tremolo riffs mixed in with, you know, all the brutality on here. When it does break away from the blast, though, I think it kind of opens up the album a little bit more because, like, again, that relentless percussive assault in here, it can get a little static. But songs like Doomed in Conterminous Decay, sorry, the font on the back is a little difficult to read, and Dredge the Pit of Burial, both of those have more like groove-laden starts, more doomy atmosphere to them. Same thing with Weakened Mortals Bleed. It kind of, you know, builds up a little bit before getting to the inevitable blast beats, because I think blast beats are on just about every track on here. But when they space out, you know, add a little bit more dynamic, the songs become a little bit more memorable. I think the other album that I got, Barbaric Retributions, was maybe a little bit more wide-reaching in terms of style. This is just kind of foot on the gas, brutal and evil. But it does kind of run together, and the songs become a little indistinct after a while. But overall, the entire vibe, like start to finish, like it's just brutal, relentless, percussive as hell, evil sounding, you know, kind of all things I look for in death metal. And honestly, for a band from Australia, This definitely sounds very Floridian. Pretty solid album. I'd probably recommend Barbaric Retributions a little bit more. I enjoyed that one a little bit more as far as like the songwriting on it, but this was still really good. It's just a relentless battering of a death metal album. And again, I would say very much like Morbid Angel, except being played by Christian at Christian speed. So yeah, it's fast, it's brutal, and relentless. And like I said, if you like any of that shit, definitely check it out. Claustrophobia I See Red. This is the 4th album from this Brazilian death thrash act. I believe they are now located in Las Vegas. I have never heard of this band before, and I picked them up on a whim. Turns out they've been around since 1994, and this is the first I've ever checked them out, and honestly, listening to them, this sounds like something I would have been listening to since I was a teenager, because this is some volatile, fast death thrash. Very tight, very syncopated. In fact, like, a lot of the stuff in here reminds me of Decapitated in terms of, like, you know, quick, chuggy, palm-muted breakdowns and, you know, syncopated riffs, but also in terms of, like, the speed and aggression, because this album is flying often. Like, there's definitely groove, but a lot of this moves at a relentless death thrash pace, very similar to, like, a Vader album or, you know, like, Hate Sphere and shit like that. Especially on songs like War Stomp, Don't Kill the Future, Evil University, which I think is just a really interesting title. I feel like I should have been going there, you know, for years. I would have probably graduated cum laude, which that sounds dirty, but it's not, even though I kind of intended it to be. Don't Kill the Future I really like because it kind of breaks away from the more speedy thrash and kind of lays into a fun D-beat section. There's some really cool lead trade-offs on that. And Raining Shit, absolutely vicious song, but the end of that song has this very soft, chill vibe, and it fades in really well to Don't Kill the Future. And there's a lot of like strange interludes on here, like kind of out of nowhere you get like Spanish guitar like in between tracks, and sometimes it really works in terms of like transitioning to the next track, and it does show off like a little bit more of their melodic side. And sometimes it just kind of pops up and kind of, you know, what the fucks you for a second, and you're like, oh, well, it's all right, and it's over, and we're back to thrashing. The one that kind of bugged me, though, was the song Noia, N-O-I-A, with an accent over the O. However you pronounce that, I might have got it right there. It's just a instrumental track of tapping, but it's like not particularly melodic. It's just sort of like technical and weird. It sounds like they were trying to ape Meshuggah in terms of like a Thorndal lead or something like that, and it's just grating, and it's like 3 minutes long, and it's entirely too long. And honestly, I think it just sort of loops at a certain point. Like, I don't think it's continuously played. It might be, but I know I didn't enjoy any of it. But thankfully, it closes on an awesome note because these guys do a absolutely badass cover of Beneath the Remains. It's like one of my favorite Sepultura songs, one of my favorite Sepultura albums. They crush the cover. They even add like a little bonus breakdown at the end of the song after the little stomping outro that's on the regular version. It was a nice little like signature stamp they put on it, especially since they skipped the acoustic lead-in on it. They kind of just went right for that main opening riff. But honestly, this was pretty solid. I would actually check out more by this band. I like the fast, relentless pace. The riffs are solid. The syncopation is tight as hell. The vocals are like kind of a good, you know, middle ground between thrash metal and death metal. I dug it. The weird interludes, though, maybe get rid of them. And yeah, I don't want to hear anything like Noia or Noia or whatever it is. I just feel like that was like an ill-conceived idea there, and it really never gelled at any point. Like, it just felt like an outtake. But outside of that, this album was pretty damn slick. So yeah, if you like shit like, well, early Sepultura for damn sure, but like Vader, Demolition Hammer, shit like that, definitely check this out. Converge, Unloved and Weeded Out. This is a compilation of unreleased material from these metalcore legends from Salem, Massachusetts. I'm a giant Converge fan, and for some odd reason, I kind of skipped over this one. But a lot of this is more like pre-Jane Doe stuff, and honestly, I'm more of a fan of Converge from Jane Doe on. Like, I like the earlier stuff, and a good chunk of this comes from When Forever Comes Crashing, which I think is an awesome album. Mostly my issues are, I don't think Jacob Bannon's vocals are quite settled in yet, and I've never really been a huge fan of his clean vocals. Like, there's definitely spots in Converge's discography where he really does an awesome job with cleans, and then there's other ones where you know, I know he has like a very emotive delivery and wailing like a maniac, but it really doesn't appeal to me. But I gotta say, this collection is absolutely fucking awesome. Downpour, Tremor, Home Song, Jacob's Ladder, like these songs are as vicious as I expect them to be from Converge. Honestly, at any point in their career, you're going to get some really vicious stuff. Maybe minus the Blood Moon stuff, which that's kind of experimental and it's more of a collaboration, but Converge delivers on intensity. I don't think they ever really skimp on that. And man, the breakdowns on here are absolutely furious. The drum work, the wild, insane riffs on here, the song structure being more, you know, spastic and all over the place and just angry and unhinged. Converge knows how to like pretty much focus emotion into their music and just make it absolutely fucking explode. Now this also has the demos from When Forever Comes Crashing, and holy shit, they are absolutely vicious. I love how raw they sound. It's way more unhinged, it's way more dirty, but honestly remastered really well. Like you can make out every fucking hostile fucking note on it. Out of the first three albums, I would definitely say When Forever Comes Crashing is probably my favorite of those three. And then again, Jane Doe kind of, you know, propelled them into another fucking tier of awesomeness in my book. But yeah, this is really awesome. And I really dig the last two tracks being live tracks. Locust Rain and This Is Mine. They have a small club vibe, like you can make out every individual scream, like you can hear when Jacob hands the mic off to a fan. It's just a nasty, explosive club show where you hope that all the insurance is paid up on the venue's part because shit's gonna get wrecked. Absolutely killer compilation, but I mean, I love almost everything by Converge. It's one of my favorite metalcore bands of all time. And yeah, another thing for my Converge collection, which I'm kind of hoping there's another Converge album, you know, on the horizon, maybe a straight up Converge album, or, you know, they might do another Blood Moon album. I don't know, but I just want more Converge. That's kind of the main thing there. But yeah, this is absolutely awesome. This is actually a comp, I would say, that is not just for fans only. It's just fucking awesome. So yeah, just check this out. It's Converge. Generally, their name on most things is a sealed quality in my book, but yeah, just check it out. It's fucking vicious as hell. Crimson Glory, Transcendence. This is the second album from this Florida-based heavy metal, progressive metal, I guess power metal. I don't like calling it that because I don't like power metal. But anyway, this is a band I've been meaning to actually check out for a while. I know Jeff over at Gas Masks and Hand Grenades gushes about this. I know Marty Worm has gushed about this, and I saw it. I figured, why not check it out? And yeah, no, this is pretty damn good. The guitar work in here is absolutely fantastic. Vocally, it's definitely more along the lines of like, you know, power metal and traditional heavy metal. Lots of high wailing, but the vocals are really well done. The vocalist Midnight, which was the name that he went by on stage, has an absolutely amazing range, or rather had. He did pass a little while ago. A lot of this I did find very similar to Queensryche, especially early Queensryche. The riff work, the lead work, but also like the whole balance of melody and aggression. Like Red Sharks, I think, is an absolutely ripping track. Like there's some more thrash metal oriented riffs on there. Amazing lead work across the board here. But you also have like more songs that are kind of anthemic, or like, you know, almost kind of like a power ballad in here. And even despite me not really liking power ballads that much, the songs are incredibly well written. Lots of great dynamics on here, and kind of regardless of which style they kind of flip to, whether it's a more aggressive song, whether it's something a little bit more subdued and melodic, they excel at it as far as composition, and I can't really fault them. Honestly, a good chunk of this really didn't come off that campy. Like there's some really cool sci-fi themes on here. Like that's where the progressive side really comes out. Like I'm sure if they were singing about wizards and dragons and shit like that, I'd be like, oh God, how long is this album? But honestly, I listened to this entire thing and I actually went back to it, and it's pretty damn good. I definitely like them at their more aggressive. Like again, Red Sharks, I think, is a huge standout. Mask of the Red Death, Eternal World, Where Dragons Rule. All right, I guess there's like one dragon on there. That's fine. One dragon is my fucking limit. But they're all really well done. And again, the riff work, the guitar work across the board is absolutely fucking fantastic. I'm going to continue to gush about that because pretty sure Jeff and Marty did, and they were 100% right. lots of cool technical playing, but also very melodic. Like there's hooks abound all over the place. And even the synths are really well done. They are used maybe a little sparingly, but when they are used, they're used very effectively. Especially in the song Burning Bridges, I think the synths really add a lot to that song. They kind of, you know, accentuate the atmosphere a bit, and they don't kind of overtake the song. The song is still more guitar and vocal driven, and it should be because the guitars and vocals are awesome. And the production at the time sounds really good on here. This was done by Jim and Tom Morris at Morris Sound Studios, and they actually had a young Scott Burns assist them on the way. So this was kind of a, you know, early one for Scott Burns where he was just sort of assisting and learning his way. And yeah, this is absolutely fucking awesome. My only issues with this, well, all right, the masks they wore during this era were a little strange, like a little too 80s weird cyberpunk party Halloween. I don't know, like it just seemed a bit much. I can't bitch about mask bands too much because I do listen to a fair amount, but it's a little weird. But the last track, the title track, is more of a dirge to close this outright very dynamic, very proggy album. And I don't know, like I was kind of hoping for like a giant closer, especially with the title track. And I do like it. It's, you know, pleasant. It's well written, just like everything on here, but it kind of, you know, it doesn't close as energetically as it opens. And that's just sort of something I look for in albums. But yeah, this is really fucking good. So yeah, Jeff, I know you love hearing this. You were absolutely right about this. Marty, you too. This is awesome, classic heavy metal, progressive metal, maybe power metal. Again, I'm not gonna call it that, even though there was one dragon. There were no wizards though. I don't see a single wizard on here. So yeah, I'm just gonna call it progressive metal, and I'm also gonna call it really good. So yeah, if you like shit like Queensryche, Fate's Warning, I would say too, definitely check this out. Really solid stuff. Def Leppard, On Through the Night. This is the debut album from this UK, well, I can't call them pop metal at this point because they hadn't hit that point. This is their new album. And honestly, it's really fucking good. I've been looking for this album for a while because from a lot of fans, in terms of like just new album fans, like, yeah, Def Leppard's first album is legit kind of a secret banger. Like High and Dry is a cool album. It's a little bit more stripped down, a little bit more rocky, and it does, of course, have Headed for a Heartbreak, which is, you know, a giant fucking song, and I love it. But this is before they were really shooting for the big singles and everything, and writing new album kind of in the vein of like Angel Witch, Diamond Head, and like Paul Di'Anno era Iron Maiden. And they do it really well. There's a lot of cool like Thin Lizzy worship on there, especially on When the Walls Came Tumbling Down. Holy shit, that song is catchy as hell. It's honestly one of the most epic songs I think I've ever heard by Def Leppard. There's really cool gallops to it. The riff work is fantastic. You have some Thin Lizzy harmonies in there. I think Joe Elliott sounds a little bit more restrained on here, like he hadn't quite got all the vocal confidence. He still sounds really good, but later albums he became way more of a centerpiece. Like this is more riff driven, and there are tons of fucking riffs on here that are just absolutely catchy as hell. Wasted and the last track, the Giant Epic Overture, are absolutely fantastic and loaded with like really killer riffs and solid bass work on here too. Now, there were some drawbacks in here, like Rocks Off actually has like fake crowd noise in here, which it kind of just sounds a little bit cheesy, but this band would get a lot cheesier later on. And Hello America, well, I mean, you know, they were pretty much waving high across the pond because that's where they wanted to, you know, make it big, and, well, they definitely did later. But the majority of this is really solid. Like, this is a flat-out new album, and it's loaded with hooks, great melodies, great guitar licks, solid vocals. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorite albums I have heard from Def Leppard, and I do love Pyromania. Like, I'm still very much in love with that. But pretty much everything after Pyromania can kind of fuck off, because at that point I was just kind of sick of them repeating the same sort of stuff and just pretty much pandering and writing, you know, radio singles. This, however, creative, fun, well-written songs, a lot more epic and a lot more dynamic, and they would slowly keep kind of stripping it down, but, you know, admittedly doing really well with it. And then to a point where they did so well with it, we started to not like them because they kept just putting the same singles out. I mean, they found a fucking solid groove, and who could fucking blame them after their singles went huge? Yeah, I guess sell the fuck out, make that money. I mean, you know, people weren't buying this one, obviously, but they should have because it's fucking awesome. So yeah, if you've never checked out Def Leppard's debut, honestly, it's one of the best ones in their discography. It's unique in the sense that it is a true blue Nwabum album, and I would say in terms of like riff work and, you know, songwriting, I think it's some of their best stuff. Kind of a sleeper gem in terms of their discography, but yeah, definitely check this out. It's highly underrated. Depeche Mode, Memento Mori. This is the 15th, possibly final album from these legends of new wave, synth, whatever you want to call them. Depeche Mode's fucking awesome. I absolutely love this band. I know I've fucking name dropped them so many goddamn times on here, but I had to pick this up, mainly because this is the first one they've done since the death of Andy Fletcher last year. Rest in peace. I wasn't sure they were going to continue on, but David Gahan and Martin Gore have decided to continue as a duo, at least for the time being. And honestly, they wrote one hell of an album. This is really fucking good. I like the fact that this doesn't try to sound too modern. This actually sounds very akin to like Violator era Depeche Mode, which Violator's like probably my favorite album by Depeche Mode. I mean, it's like almost everyone's fucking favorite. I mean, all the hits are on that album. But they did get some cool assistance in the form of Richard Butler of Psychedelic Furs. He actually co-wrote, I believe, 4 songs on here. And the songs are absolutely excellent. Like, you have great hooky songs like Wagging Tongue and Ghosts Again. Ghosts Again is absolutely catchy as hell. Don't Say You Love Me and Speak to Me both have these great dreary hooks, and Gahan has such an awesome voice. Like, he just kind of croons misery and love lost and sultriness and just kind of a wide range of emotions. And I don't know, I feel like he's just singing with his pelvis throughout most of this album, but also from his heart, because there's a lot of heartfelt lyrics in here about, you know, loss and such, and they definitely experienced that. You got some good throwback songs like Caroline's Monkey and People Are Good, even though I thought people were people. I guess they're good now, but Caroline's Monkey is definitely more of a throwback to, like, you know, the mid-'80s era Depeche Mode. The one that really stood out to me for kind of an odd reason is Soul With Me. It almost sounds like a dreary Hall & Oates song. Like, there's sort of a Blue-Eyed Soul sort of, like, I don't know, essence to it, but at the same time, it's definitely Depeche Mode. It's just, I don't know, it has a totally different vibe on it. But overall, I love this album. This is fantastic. It's dark and dreary and heavy in a completely different sense, and it works. And man, I don't want it to be the last one, but at the same time, I would totally get it. And if this is the last one, they left on a really good note. I've liked a fair amount of their recent stuff. I think Delta Machine is, like, low-key, like, a really fucking awesome album that I think may have got overlooked a little bit. But I think this is one of their most well-rounded albums here fairly recently. Like, this is just solid. If you love Depeche Mode, you're gonna love it. The songs are catchy, they're dark and dreary, and you can dance to them if you want to dance, or you can just sit in a dark room sipping wine from a glass and be fucking mopey as fuck about them. Totally understandable. It has both of those vibes. Even if you're not a Depeche Mode fan, just check it out. I think it's just really well done. I'm a giant fanboy of Depeche Mode, so of course I'm going to say check it out. But yeah, if this is their swan song, it's a pretty fucking awesome one. And if not, then good luck matching this one, because this is really fucking excellent. So yeah, check it out. Dodecahedron Kwintessens. This is the second and final album from this Dutch avant-garde black metal act. I believe last time I was down in Florida as well, I picked up their first album, which I was really impressed with. So naturally I was interested in this one. This band features current and former members of Exvius and Ulsect, and this is just twisted, chaotic, very dissonant. Probably going to use that word a lot because that is very accurate in terms of their style. The songs are loaded with atmosphere and just strange descending and ascending riffs. The vocals really remind me a lot of Enslaved, honestly. Like, it has that sort of Grutle sort of, you know, extra flair to them. And vocally, like, the patterns are almost like rants and fits, and that kind of matches up with the chaotic nature of a good chunk of this album. Now, there is a lot of, like swells in terms of like, you know, dropping everything down to like a more atmospheric drone, especially on the interlude on here, which is a bit more slow, a bit more like post-metal, like kind of builds the mood a little bit, builds the atmosphere, which there's lots of like creepy noises and such, especially on Finale, which is another interlude on here that a lot of like weird hissing noises and shit. Like it's generally kind of unsettling. This is kind of comparable to Portal. I would say in some facets, like it's very layered, it's very distant, it kind of greets you like a wall of sound. And again, the very chaotic nature of the album, it does kind of feel like that, but I think there's, again, more dynamics to it and kind of makes for a more interesting listen. And these guys like to throw in like some really cool breakdowns like on Octahedron/Arbinger, very old school Meshuggah, actually kind of comparable to Nightmare overall, which we just went over their most recent album, which I need to order that one still too. The strange thing about this is honestly, like Octahedron is sort of a tipping point and it starts getting more melodic after that. Like it gets a more like accessible, I guess. It's still like kind of nut sounding, but there's more tunes and layers. And again, you get that sort of like post-metal vibe with all the layered melodies on there. And I think that's something they kind of did on the last one too, which was weird because it started off really fucking raw and crazy. And then as it went on, it sort of opened up and, you know, invited some melody on and it turned into a really awesome album. And I kind of get the same vibe on this. Now, it definitely did tip back to the Nightmare side a bit on Icosahedron. I don't know what that is. The Death of Your Body. That one gets way more nightmarish and evil sounding. But again, at that point, I think when you hear all the melody, the sound sort of opens up a little bit. And while it is horrific sounding, it's actually quite engaging. I've been looking for this one for a while just because I really like the first one. And since they only had 2 albums, this would pretty much complete their discography. And yeah, both albums are awesome. I might favor the first one a little bit more, but I've had more time with it. But this is really awesome, just twisted black metal. And I would say if you're a fan of bands like Alterage, Nightmare, I would even say Portal to a degree, albeit way more black metal, definitely check this out. This is quite the mind-bending listen. And finally we have Dwell, Vermin and Ashes. This is the lone full length from this Dutch Death Doom act. Outside of an EP that came out in 2017, that is it from these guys. They actually broke up not too long after that EP. Featured current and former members of Saracloth, Horned Almighty, and Undergang. This is just some gritty death doom, and it's pretty decent. I have some issues with the production on here. Like the guitars are nice and heavy. The vocals are more of like a raspy, kind of almost blackened death doom sort of sound. Like they're not like always deep roars. Like there's a little bit of that black metal sound to them. But like the production is, I don't know, kind of hit or miss. Like mainly on the drums. The drums sound way too compressed, and generally with death doom, you kind of want like big reverby sound because you want it to sound like it was recorded in a giant fucking tomb, because that's kind of the vibe of death doom. But you get a lot of big, heavy droning riffs. The title track actually gets a little bit more like death metal. Like there's some faster paced stuff in there, even some blast beats for just a second. And I really like the song Plunging into Ash Tombs. There's a really good dissonant melody that is repeated throughout that. And it has a really shreddy, like kind of cool lead on it. It's like decidedly very melodic. But an issue I had with this was the interlude tracks in here, Become the Void and Pathless and Dormant. Both of those are relatively long songs for what they are, and they're a lot of droning atmosphere. In fact, Pathless and Dormant is almost like sci-fi soundscapes with like a droning riff behind it, and like kind of just like groaned and screamed vocals. And it feels more like stoner doom, like you're building into a stoner doom song, but it never really gets there. It kind of just stays this atmospheric song, and it's not particularly interesting. It just kind of, you know, plateaus very early. And honestly, it was kind of forgettable. And by the time you got to the title track, you were like, well, I mean, that was just kind of time wasted. And Become the Void is kind of the same thing. It's a bit more electronic and synthy, but again, it kind of feels like it's sort of padding out the length of this album, which the songs are decent, but I feel like they're a little bare bones. Like they really don't get too dynamic until you get to the title track and Plunging into Ash Tombs. I think the dissonant melodies are probably the things that really stand out the most. The riffs themselves, while they're heavy and drony and kind of contribute to the atmosphere, they don't really jump out at you. And again, with the issues I have with the production being like kind of compressed in some regard, like that is not really the sound you kind of want for Death Doom, at least in my opinion. Like I think it needs to sound like huge. You can't, you know, squeeze it down too much. Otherwise it sounds like you're in a really small coffin versus, you know, an entire mausoleum. This was pretty decent though. I thought it was, you know, okay as far as like Death Doom goes. I check out the EP too, you know, just to see what that one sounds like, see if they, you know, corrected some stuff or changed anything on that one. But as it stands, this one's just, you know, kind of a decent Death Doom project. I was more entranced by the fact that this band had, you know, members from other bands that I really liked. And, you know, sometimes supergroups aren't necessarily that super, like the sum of the parts don't necessarily equal the whole, but still worthy of checking it out. And honestly, it's not bad. It's just kind of, you know, middle of the road. Pretty much, I mean, if you like Death Doom in general, you'll probably find some stuff you like on here. But I mean, overall, it's just okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's tons of like just okay albums that I still enjoy. But, you know, the ones that really jump out that kind of go beyond that, those are the ones I'm probably going to listen to more. But still, check this out. Like if you like, I would say Hooded Menace is kind of comparable. It does have a little bit of like Cereclaw sound too, if you like those guys, albeit with like decidedly more Doom. But yeah, check it out. It's heavy and dark and yeah, it's Death Doom. Check it out. All right, that knocks out the first chunk out of this Florida trip. There is a ton more to come. I bought a lot of shit, and to say these next few are going to be circulating around everything I bought in Florida is an understatement, because it'll be more than a few for damn sure. And then again, we're going to get to the stuff I got in Denver, which I definitely helped out a lot of bands by buying their shit too. But yeah, tons of these coming. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsandmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there, as well as our store, which we will eventually load up on stuff. We're still kind of figuring out what we want to do in terms of merch. We have some cool design ideas, but we're still in the idea phase. And yeah, these things take time, but just be patient with us, because we'll have something new eventually. We also have a giveaway going on for once we hit 15,000 subscribers, which is just an insane number. I have a stack of 10 CDs I want to give away to some rabid metal fan out there. All you have to do is click the link down below to the video. It's also playing automatically on our channel. All you have to do is comment on there and you are entered. Once we hit the magical number, I will do a little comment randomizer and pick a winner, announce it on here, and probably once again profusely thank the living fuck out of you guys, because you are all fucking awesome, and we love that you guys have just kept us going all this time. Like, you're the driving force behind this. I mean, that and the metal. Got to give the metal, you know, a lot of credit there too. But you guys are fucking awesome. We love talking to you guys. We love seeing you guys at shows. It's fucking amazing doing this. But yeah, plenty of stuff coming. And once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.